Hey everyone, welcome to Afterthoughts. This week Aiden is preaching and you did preach.
Yep.
And you preached on
Although not yet, but in real time, but theoretically.
That's right.
They've seen it.
That's right. And so this week you preached on the latter portion of Ecclesiastes 3.
Mhm.
And so before we get into your summary, we wanted people to read that, right?
Yep.
So take a minute with your group or on your own and just read Ecclesiastes 3:16 to 22. So now, Aiden, do you want to take us through a summary of what you spoke about?
Yeah. It was rather intense, as Ecclesiastes often is. And so, the author of Ecclesiastes has been going through lots of different things in life and kind of unveiling a lot of the truth that some of us have a hard time accepting or try to ignore about the reality of life. And so he can often seem depressed. But again, it's not just him being depressed. It's actually, I think, him being more honest than we are often comfortable with. And so us thinking he's depressed is often, I think, more of a reflection of ourselves than of the actual author. And so he continues from where he left off last week in chapter 3 and begins to talk about the reality of death as a time that will eventually find all of us and what that means. And so I talked about my daughter Kaya and how she's started to reach for things that she wants, which is really funny and rather cute. But I know that there will come a point where she actually can reach for the things that she wants and get them. And there will come a point where she will take things she's not supposed to have and take things away from other kids. And I will have to teach her how to be a good person. And I won't have to teach her how to be a bad person.
Yes, I have also discovered this in my parenting journey.
The thing that will come naturally to her will be selfishness and looking out for herself and not looking out for others. And it's interesting that what's ingrained in human beings that just comes naturally is that often wickedness can come out of us, that things that aren't what's right will be the thing that comes out of us. And we actually have to teach our kids to do the right thing. We don't often have to teach them to do the wrong thing. That just comes naturally. And so Ecclesiastes is going to look at this and wrestle with it specifically for us. And so he starts in the passage by looking at the world and just being overwhelmed by essentially oppression and injustice, where there should be good things and there should be justice and there should be the right thing happening. And when he looks at the world, it's the opposite. And what's interesting is that if this is Solomon writing this, he's like the king. So he's actually in charge of his kingdom and making sure justice happens. But when he looks at his kingdom, he notices injustice. And I think a large part of that, and the thing that we're often not willing to wrestle with, is that this injustice problem isn't just for other people and those people that we think about. It's actually something that's within us. And that's what he's kind of addressing, is that inside of us, just like how inside my daughter, there is some form of brokenness that will eventually come out. There's the same thing in us. And often we project, according to psychology, a lot of the things we actually feel towards ourselves and know to be true about ourselves onto other people so that we can appease how we actually feel, that we often carry around a weight of knowing that there's a lot of brokenness in us, but trying to ignore it and pretend like it's not actually there. And Ecclesiastes wants you to wrestle with that is the case, that there is brokenness inside of you, that the same injustice that you see in Gaza, in Ukraine, on social media is actually within you. It's not just those people over there. It's actually the person looking in the mirror. And he wants you to wrestle with that. And then because of that, he wants you to then wrestle with the fact that you're going to die. He spends a long time talking about how essentially death is coming for everybody. And that just like how animals die, and we all are aware that animals die, we are the same. That eventually this sin that's inside of us will completely consume us to the point that we will die. And not only will we die, but humanity will have to answer for its injustice or the things that it did wrong before God, that eventually you will die and stand before God and have to give an account for your life. And he really wants you to wrestle with that and the weight of that. And I quoted Mark Clark, who's someone who preached a series actually on Ecclesiastes that is one of my favorite sermon series I've ever listened to. But he talks about how we often in life try as hard as we can to avoid this fact that we're going to die and that we'll eventually stand before God, that we want to try to keep that out of our brains as much as possible. I talked about last week how hospitals are often a place for this, where we don't want death to be too close to home, and so we push it far away in those things that make us uncomfortable. And death is one of those things that our culture spends so much time trying to prolong, seeming like they're healthy, seeming like you're not aging, living in denial that it's going to happen to you. But eventually it does catch up to you. And sadly, as someone who is a pastor and as someone who's walked with a lot of people who have passed away, when it does catch up to them, people have a lot of regret because they've been ignoring that fact for a long time, which has affected the way that they've lived. And it actually leads you living with a lot of regret, specifically when it comes to the judgment piece, because you're like, I am going to have to answer for a lot of those things. And then he ends with saying, so in all of this, you should recognize that injustice is happening. You're part of the problem. Eventually, you're going to die, and you're going to have to stand before God. And he's like, so what should you do? And he's like, well, you should do the work that God's given you to do and enjoy it. And I wanted to lean into this again, and we talked about this last week, but I wanted to really lean into what is the work that God has called us to do. That often we can just think it's our job or our career or being a parent or whatever, but there's actually something deeper biblically in what the work is. And if you go all the way back to Genesis, what human beings were designed to do, the work that they were created to do was to partner with God in restoring the world. That they were supposed to be the people who would partner with him and take chaos and bring order out of it, that they would see injustice and they would fix it. And what the author of Ecclesiastes is saying is that humanity isn't living up to the work they're supposed to do. And so you can feel this weight of how, if you're like me, how am I supposed to do this work and partner with God if I have all of this injustice in me and I'm constantly putting off thinking about even dying because I know that there's a lot of stuff that I'm missing the mark on. And to think about judgment often is a scary thing. And that's where grace comes in. That's where you need to have grace. And eventually Ecclesiastes will dive into this more. But in a passage like this, I couldn't just leave you in chapter 3 because it would just be depressing, where grace isn't karma, that there is injustice and that we commit injustices both to other people, to ourselves, and to God, of living in a way that isn't actually the way we were designed. And what's incredible is that God doesn't actually give us what we deserve. It's not like karma, where karma is like what goes around comes around and the bad that you put into the world will be done back to you. That God is actually incredibly gracious, and that he's offering through Jesus the opportunity to have all of that injustice rewritten and covered for, to have it answered for. And it doesn't have to be answered by you, but it actually is answered by Jesus. And he can free you up from the guilt and shame and condemnation so that you can live into the work that God created you to do, to be the person he called you to be, and to partner with him in restoring and renewing the world and being a part of undoing the injustice in the world. And so a person that I really like is Bono. I find him really compelling because he's one of the few Christians in the world who I feel like actually care deeply about injustice and watching brokenness, and he tries his best to do something about it, that he does a ton of justice work. And I quoted him where he essentially said that he doesn't see the world in the lens of karma, but from a lens of grace, and that's transformed who he is, where now he wants to help other people, that he wants to help end AIDS and save people from dying from that disease. He wants to help end poverty and does things for it and partners with God in it, not because he wants to earn salvation, not because he's doing all these things because he knows he's going to die and one day will have to answer before God and wants to be able to answer rightly. That's not the motivation as to why, where he's not trying to build his portfolio for God, but instead it's coming from a place of understanding God's grace and what God has done for him, and that God has freed him from all of that. And now he can partner with God in doing the work God is doing. And so at the end of the day, my main point was that humanity is broken. And that's just the reality and the truth, that if we're honest, and if you look at both outside and inside yourself, humanity is broken, but that God is still using us and inviting us to partner with him. And so there you go.
So some reflection questions moving on here. First one, why do you think it's often easier to see brokenness or sin in others than in ourselves? And what might Jesus be inviting us into when we notice that tendency? The author of Ecclesiastes and the teacher are constantly reminding us that our time on earth will end, that it is but a vapor. Like our life is short, essentially.
Yeah.
Right? And so the point, though, is not to depress us, like you said. The point is to awaken us to the fact that we have a limited amount of time. We don't know what that time is. So, like, use it wisely. Be intentional. Don't squander it. Even though it is but a vapor, it can be used. Yeah. And so our question here for you guys, the next question, how might your day-to-day shift if you lived with a constant awareness of your mortality and the reality of standing before God one day? What would you let go of? What would you embrace more of? Can I throw that one to you, Aiden?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a lot that you could say. I think one thing that I can actually think that happened this week that's a practical example is me and my wife, like many people in the world, realize that we spend a lot of time on technology and specifically watching TV. That it was super easy to just turn something on and do it. And especially when you're living in like a 1-bedroom basement suite, your TV is literally like in the room always. And so one thing that we did intentionally was we got rid of our TV and bought a projector instead that isn't always set up, so that it was inconvenient for us to set it up, where it just was a thing that makes it harder. And so it was just something that we felt like we needed to do because of this, of recognizing, especially in having a daughter now, of being like, we don't want our lives, and we felt this before we had her too, to be just kind of essentially wasted away. Where there's good things in TV, and I love, the reason why I was watching is because I love film and entertainment and all of that stuff. And I think there's a lot of value to it. But at the end of the day, when I'm on my deathbed, I'm not going to be thinking like, man, I wish I just scrolled one more TikTok video or whatever.
Never finish that season of whatever.
And it's not the core thing that I wanted a lot of my free time to be spent with. And so because I have a huge lack of self-control, I just had to get rid of it, because I'm not the kind of person who can just have a giant TV in the center of the space I'm normally in and not turn it on. So that was something that we did recently because of this, where if I'm honest, if I knew I was going to die tomorrow, I wouldn't watch anything today. Like, I just wouldn't, or I'd be like, what's the point? And again, we can't live every single second like we're going to die tomorrow. But you can look at the things of your life and be like, is that really something I would be embracing as much as I am? Yeah. In light of that. And you're like, honestly, probably not. And most of us know that. We just choose to, like Mark Clark says, often shove that down and be like, don't think about that. I want to do this thing. And so that's one thing recently. The thing that I would embrace too is actually, which was in getting rid of that, was relationships with people, whether it's with my wife or with my daughter or with friends. That those to me are the things that actually matter a lot more. And so that would be something I would embrace too. But there you go. I didn't know I'd be sharing that, but there you go.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Now we're going to get you guys to read Ephesians 2, 1-10. Now, in light of reading that, we want you guys to think about this. How would you describe the difference between grace and karma? How should the reality of God's grace change the way you work, live, or treat the oppressed? If I were to answer that a little bit, sometimes it's really easy to have a bit of a calloused view towards people and be like, well, they made dumb choices.
That's what you get.
Yeah. And But I'm grateful that God doesn't have that view of us.
No. Yeah.
Because that would be unfortunate for us.
Yeah.
And so it's always good to be reminded of God's grace for us, and the reminder of how that should change how we view others and treat them and interact with them and try to help them regardless of the choices they've made. I mean, as a parent, you get to live this out all the time because sometimes you're like, well, that's what you get. So it's a balance because you're trying to teach lessons, right?
Yeah. Which God does too. It's not like he just is like, it doesn't matter.
Yes.
Like that's why Jesus died.
Right. But you never stop loving your kids, regardless of what they do. And there's always open arms and grace for them. And you still want the best for them, regardless of things that they do or say or try to hide. And so, I think, obviously, as often as talked about, parenting reveals a lot about how God loves us. But being a gracious parent, has taught, or trying to be a gracious parent. I wouldn't say I'm a perfectly gracious parent, but trying to be a gracious parent has been one of the things that has taught me about God's grace the most. That, and also being a gracious spouse, which is almost harder.
I think it is harder, actually.
Yeah.
It's
because
different. There's something mentally different about your kid versus your spouse. That's just different.
Yeah. So choosing to love someone that isn't part of your DNA. It does teach us a lot about grace. And so, which I think the relationships are meant to teach us about God's character, which is awesome. And so,
marriage is supposed to be a reflection of God's character.
Yeah.
In how Jesus actually treats the church. Like that's literally what it's supposed to be like in their relationship.
Yeah.
And so it should be reflected.
And if we operated in those relationships with like a karma mentality, they would just be terrible.
Yeah.
Like relationship doesn't work.
And often that is the thing that destroys marriages and relationships. It's like, well, you did this and so I do this and whatever, and it's holding people constantly to an account all the time and not being gracious will erode. Because it's not how we were meant to live. We weren't meant to live like that.
Yeah. And we think it'll be better for us sometimes because it feels like justice.
Yeah. But until it's you.
Yeah.
And then you're like, please treat me with grace.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's the end of Ecclesiastes chapter 3. We'll be moving on to chapter 4 next week. And we're just trucking along in this.
Oh, we are.
We're
moving real quick.
Book of the Bible. All right. Thanks for joining us for Afterthoughts. I'm Tiana.
I'm Aiden.
I don't know how you sign it off usually.
Goodbye.